So after playing Diablo 4 all the way through and dumping countless hours into it, I feel I may be qualified to give an honest review of the game. Now I'll go over a lot of different aspects of the game, and at the end I will give it a final overall star rating. And if you haven't voted on how good you think Diablo 4 is, there's a link in the description along with a link to a giveaway if you want to enter for a chance to win. So let's begin. If you liked Diablo 3, I will say it, you will like Diablo 4. There are a lot of similarities between the two games. I found myself wanting to play more and more, which to me means the game is doing something right. It's addictive, it's fun, and I want to complete my build, make my character stronger, and find more loot. I like the side quests and progression you can feel through Renown, which is earned on a zone-by-zone basis with the same rewards in each zone. You get extra potion charges, extra skill points, and max obol capacity. Obels are pretty much the shards you'd use to gamble with Kadala from Diablo 3 to get good items, so this is one system that is carried over to Diablo 4 from Diablo 3. Item drops and overall gameplay feels a lot like Diablo 3. Itemization feels like Diablo 3, and one thing I feel was really lost with Diablo 3 and 4, because they're quite similar, was the item art. Diablo 2 had huge item artwork, and it made you really feel like when you found an item, you found something really, really cool. That was something that was lost in Diablo 3 and again in Diablo 4, with small item artwork and massive paragraphs of text detailing what the item does with affixes, DPS, and so on. Now the character tab has a massive image of your character, which in my opinion most characters look unsightly, especially the druid. Now there's nothing wrong with that, but I'd rather see the big item artwork than my hard on the eyes druid personally. When it comes to difficulty, I feel like it's very similar to Diablo 3. I would say the game starts out feeling like it's harder than Diablo 3, but not nearly as hard as Diablo 2, where you enter hell mode and you just go right back onto nightmare realizing you're not ready. Overall, the difficulty was really not there in Diablo 4 if you ask me. Now I think one thing they did very well was actually make the classes feel different. For example, I'm glad the druid feels weak early on. That's the kind of class identity that makes a good game in my opinion, right? The druid was weak early on, gets really, really good, I would say kind of mid to late game, and sort of where I'm at right now, my druid just feels invulnerable. And he started off really weak, struggling to kill stuff, but now he's really strong. I like that. And there's certain classes that, like sorceress, just right out the gate, they're doing great, and I think that's fine too. Now, one minor thing as a Diablo fan that bothered me about Diablo 4 is the naming of creatures. I just find it really, really bland. For example, there's a champion called Snowy Fallen Shaman. Like, I just don't like how, because it has a frost affix, it just becomes snowy, and then the monster name. This to me is just not exciting, and it's kind of weird calling it snowy. Like, why is a demon snowy? I don't know. Like, what happened to Puke Filth the Gorger or Snot Drinker the Vile? These elite monster names were so much more memorable because they're shocking. It's like, who is, like, there's a monster called Snot Drinker the Vile? Like, that, I'm gonna remember that for the rest of my life, and if this is someone's first Diablo game, they're completely missing how awesome the sort of prefix and suffix system of elite monster naming was in Diablo 2. And honestly, I just think that the naming of monsters in Diablo 4 just doesn't do the trick for me. When I see Snowy Fallen Shaman, it's the most forgetful thing I've ever seen. I don't care. Like, okay, Snowy, he's gonna try to freeze me. It doesn't mean anything to me, right? So that's one thing that I would say is lacking. It's not as memorable. It's not as legendary. It's kind of just bland. Now, when it comes to the skill tree, I would say it feels somewhat like Diablo 2, but beyond just putting points into a skill up to 5, every single skill will just branch off into 2 options, leaving you with needing to choose one of the 2. Now, I would say the skill tree is actually not that interesting because almost in every case I've found, one is just simply better than the other. If you look at Landslide, like the Terra motes are just better. I would never see a case where someone doesn't choose that if they're getting Landslide. This is just one example, but I find the skill tree to be somewhat unimpressive in that respect. It's all a lot of the same. Every single branch off of the skill is just called enhanced, and then whatever that one skill is called. So there's a ton of things just called, enhanced poison creeper, enhanced wolves, enhanced pulverize, enhanced lance. It's just enhanced. So a little bit lacking in terms of creativity, if you ask me, on the skill tree. And I know they've gone through a lot of iterations, but I feel like they didn't nail it in terms of the skill tree. I think it could be better, if I'm totally honest. Like a lot of other games did really great with skill trees, like World of Warcraft, Diablo 2. I thought those skill trees were really well done. Even Path of Exile, I really like theirs. Now, the salvage system is back from Diablo 3. You can salvage gear at the blacksmith, use that salvage thing, those salvage materials to upgrade your gear, which is a little different from Diablo 3 where you could actually craft gear, but that's not done at the blacksmith. You can upgrade gear, salvage gear, things like that. The jeweler is also back from Diablo 3. The jeweler can take sockets out, upgrade your gems, upgrade your jewelry, which is new, being able to upgrade things. And so it's old systems from Diablo 3 with a slightly new touch. You know, honestly, these systems are not the most exciting. It kind of just feels like something you have to do in order to stay competitive. Like, oh, you have to upgrade your jewelry. You have to upgrade your weapons and armor 4 out of 4 in order to make sure your stuff is upgraded. It doesn't feel like there's too much depth there. It's kind of just like get the materials and then upgrade your stuff, right? There's also a new vendor called the Occultist. It's a new vendor allowing to extract and imprint legendary powers, which again is a Diablo 3 system with having those legendary affixes. But the new part is that you can extract these from legendaries and imprint them onto rares, turning them into legendaries. So that's the new part. I would actually say I like this system, particularly the Codex of Power, which gives you the ability to imprint a legendary affix you found over and over an unlimited number of times, and you unlock these through completing dungeons, which I like a lot. It gives a lot more meaning to the dungeons you complete. I would say, you know, it actually gives you like a path to follow instead of just, you know, following the quest chain. You're like, oh, I'm going to go out of my way to do this particular dungeon to unlock this legendary aspect and get added to my Codex of Power because it's key for the build that I'm planning. Now that right there, I think is a good system. Whoever designed the Codex of Power, unlocking it through dungeons, I think this was well thought out, and I think that this is a good addition to Diablo 4. Probably one of the most exciting of the mechanics that they added. I think they did a really good job there. One thing I'm not a fan of is the in-game shop, nor the wardrobe for transmogs. It's just not my thing. If it's yours, then more power to you, but I'm glad that they didn't force me to use it. I'm glad there are preset character choices at the start for those like me who don't want to customize their character. It's just, you know, honestly, I'm sure there are other people like me where, you know, huge levels of customization is not super important. Like, I'm absolutely fine just playing the same exact looking sorcerer like it was in Diablo 2 or druid or paladin. It's fine if they look the same way every time and everyone looks that way. Totally fine with me. So never really was a big fan of customization. You know, for those who like it, I'm glad it's there, but I'm glad I don't have to use it. I like the presets, so good on them for there. Now, one thing I thought was very interesting was the changing of skill points. It's super easy and not punishing at all. Now, this is something that Blizzard has typically not done, actually. They made it very, very hard in almost every game I can think of. Diablo 2, you know, you couldn't actually change your skill points ever originally. And then in the current state of the game, you can only do it 3 times by doing the Den of Evil. And then if you want to do it beyond that, you have to collect some very difficult to find materials to reset your skill points again. So very difficult in Diablo 2. In World of Warcraft, you had to pay a pretty hefty fee to reset your talents, and you had to be your trainer to do it. So it's not easy, right? And Diablo 3 actually made it pretty easy. You can literally just anytime you're not in combat, switch your stuff up. And there really wasn't a cost. Now, Diablo 4, I think they wanted to involve some cost, which they have. It's some gold, but it's very, very easy to change. You don't have to go to town. You just right click your skill, it's gone, and you can reallocate very easily. So it's a little bit harder because it costs some gold than Diablo 3. Also, with the addition of the Paragon board, you know, you have more customization options. Paragon boards you can also change up as well, but honestly it's just cost gold, and so they made it easier actually than it's been in the past, similar to Diablo 3. So I thought this was interesting because, you know, in the interviews, you know, we were kind of led to believe it would not be easy to change our skill trees, our decisions, but the opposite turned out to be true. It seems very, very easy and not punishing at all, which is very similar to Diablo 3. So whether you like that or not, personally, you know, I kind of like it, actually. I think it's kind of cool that you don't get punished if you make a mistake. You can alter your build at will. It's definitely more casual friendly, which is, to be honest, it's fine. You know, a lot of people wanted dual spec in World of Warcraft. And I think over time we've realized that this is not something that should be a barrier. You should be allowed to play your character however you want and make it easy to change the way you play. So ultimately, I've come around. I think that it's actually a really great feature, and I'm glad it's as easy as it is to try and test different builds so that you're not limited in terms of creativity. You don't have to just go online, look up the best build. You can kind of experiment on your own and figure out what you like. So I'm going to say good job on that to Blizzard. Now, one thing I am critical of is the campaign story. Not the biggest fan, honestly. It didn't make that much sense to me, but to be fair, I also really didn't like Diablo 3's story. I'm not sure how these prime evils keep coming back, even after their essence is trapped in a soul stone, and then that soul stone is destroyed. Maybe I'm missing some key information, but it kind of seems like a stretch to me. I think that the characters of Diablo 4 are actually quite good. Characters like Lorath, Donan, Lilith, and Inarius. To me, these are interesting characters, but I felt like the plot itself, what events transpired, left me looking for more. I was hoping probably for a little more depth, a little more, this makes sense, a little, multiple timelines going on. But to be honest, the story just sort of left me looking for something better. But I did feel like some of the characters were pretty good, and I did watch all the cutscenes, listen to all the narratives. But that's personally how I feel. Wasn't so excited about the campaign, in total honesty. Now, there are a lot of new mechanics introduced in Diablo 4, things like distant, close, healthy, injured, crowd-controlled, fortified, and so on. For a new player, I'm sure it's very confusing, but if you played MMORPGs or even previous Blizzard titles, it's really not that bad. I think one thing that definitely needs work, though, is how they describe things in tooltips. It's actually not very congruent at all and leads to a lot of confusion, which is evident from all the questions that developers have to answer on Twitter. For example, Aspect of the Trampled Earth says that trample is now a nature, magic, and earth skill. Great, that makes sense. It's nature, magic, and earth. It says that. But then Aspect of the Ursine Horror says pulverize is now an earth skill. Any logical person would think that it means it's just an earth skill, because nowhere in the description was nature magic mentioned at all, like it was in Aspect of Trampled Earth. But surprise, surprise, it actually is. And the only way to figure that out is by using the aspect and then mousing over the ability to see it has that nature magic tag. To me, this just shows that there is not an attention to detail that is necessary when writing these sort of tooltips, these descriptions of what aspects do. And I think, we've seen a major patch that went through, I believe it was like the Server Slam patch, where they like rewrote a ton of skills. Like the writing was just bad. And I'm just being honest, this is a fact. They literally reworded things, made it more clear. I think, if we're looking at this logically, they kind of did a bad job in describing things. Players didn't know if something is frozen, if that's considered chilled. There's just not a lot of description, and frankly, a lot of the developers didn't know the answer to a lot of these questions. They were like, oh, gonna refer you to so-and-so. So it definitely needed a lot of work, but to be honest, the fact that they went back, they made that patch, reworded a bunch of stuff, it shows that they're aware of the lack and that they're working on it. So I think that's good. And that's the one thing I have to compliment the Diablo team on, is that they are definitely receptive of feedback. The bar is set very high by games like Diablo 2, and even Diablo 3 was a good game, but they are responding to feedback and doing a better job. And, it's different people, right? Like, I don't think the same people who made Diablo 2 are making Diablo 4. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure that's the case. And so it's kind of a high bar to live up to someone else's work, and I'm just glad that they're doing their best, I guess. But just wanted to point that out, that I think the description still needs some work. Also, if you were a Diablo 2 or even Diablo 3 fan, there are parts of those games that are completely missing from Diablo 4. Not saying they have to be there, but things like set items, runes, rune words. Now, I know there weren't rune words in Diablo 3, but we were expecting that in Diablo 4. There also were sets in Diablo 3, and there are not sets in Diablo 4. Not saying the way they did sets in Diablo 3 is correct, because I think most people would agree they did it wrong, but sets were definitely amazing in Diablo 2. They weren't the end-all be-all, but they were a fun part of collecting items. Complete the set, get your set bonuses. It's just a fun thing to do. Well, they aren't in Diablo 4. But they are planned to be added later on. Does this mean the game was released incomplete? I don't know if I would say that, but it sounds like the game was released with a part missing. Also, what's missing is the namesake of the game, Diablo. There is no Diablo. There's no fight against Diablo. He's mentioned, but he's not in the game at all. Now, I'm hoping he'll be back in some expansion pack maybe, or a later season, but that's not guaranteed. It's not the biggest deal for me, but definitely a part of why I think the campaign is a bit lacking. Overall, I like the simpler theme. You aren't the most powerful hero in the world. There aren't tasks too beneath you, whether it's going and gathering flowers for a quest or placing totems for a farmer. You don't feel like you're this all-powerful being saying, and in a way it feels a lot like an MMORPG in that respect, which I don't mind. You know, go help the farmer fight off the rats infesting his farm, right? The developers made a conscious effort to make the game a little more down to earth, which I don't really mind. I think it's different, and you know, everyone's entitled to have their preference, and I think this is all right. Other aspects like world bosses and the presence of long side quest chains are elements of MMORPGs that appear. Not a bad touch, I would say, and it helps you make, in my opinion, kind of makes you feel more connected to the world, actually. Just interacting with people, helping them, hearing their plight. It kind of makes the world feel more alive. Now, overall, I would give Diablo 4 a total star rating of 4. It's not the perfect game, but not many games I would say are perfect, and it has done a good job at fixing some of the mistakes of other games. In my opinion, it has improved upon Diablo 3, where the skill section was very bland, if you ask me, and Diablo 4 has me wanting to play more, which is definitely a sign the game is good. I actually want to try out all the different classes. I like the class identity, the class quests. I think it's good. Now, I want to know, what do you think of Diablo 4? Let me know in the comments, because I'm really curious to hear what you have to say, and please try to be civil. I know this can be a heated topic, and not everyone's going to agree with me, and that's fine, and they're probably not going to agree with you. Everyone has their own opinion, but try to keep it civil if you can. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.